Savor it, because there aren't too many Santelli exchanges left in this week, but we've got one right now. Rick Santelli at the CNBC.
Thanks, David, and a real good one, too. 6th District of Illinois, my area of the country. Republican Representative Peter Roskam. Congressman, thanks for taking the time.
It's great to be with you, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
What a wild time we've had. And I'm not only talking about the Cubs winning the World Series, okay? Listen, the markets have had big moves since November 8th. Your thoughts on President Trump and how the markets have played out since the election?
All right, so you know my constituency well. It's the west and northwest suburbs of Chicago, a lot of manufacturers, a lot of financial services, and they're looking over the landscape saying, hey, we've got an administration that's not coming after us anymore. We've got an administration that's not going to be burying us with regulation. We've got an administration that is going to give us the benefit of the doubt. And from a business point of view, I think that's explaining part of the buoyancy and part of the excitement. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but in terms of anticipation and the feeling that Washington has not got a target on the back of business, I think that explains a great deal of the momentum.
I think that explains a lot. So basically, when you talk to some of these constituents, the first thing they say is, oh, we're hoping that we have a lotto ticket here for the government to do good things. It's much more than that, in your opinion?
Oh, it's much more than that. Get off my back. If you're going to have a regulation, make sure the regulation is rational and reasonable. Probably it's unnecessary, first of all, but if it is necessary...
But see, when you give things name of Consumer Financial Protection Board, how can that possibly be not good? That's like having a law say, you must be good, and then somebody wants to repeal it, and the media says, oh my God, look at the law. It's everybody must be good.
Yeah,
but these great names don't really describe what's underneath,
No,
do they?
don't. And I'll give you an example. I was out with a not-for-profit organization in my constituency a couple of months ago. The Department of Labor rule, the overtime rule, this is an organization that had a $13 million budget. They said to me, Peter, this is going to cost us $500,000 a year. Now think about that. $13 million annually, $500,000 It had an impact negatively on the exact clients and kids with disabilities that they were hoping to help, and it creates this level of absurdity. So now you've got an administration that comes in and says, we're not going to do that to you. That's where some of the freshness comes. That's where the opportunity comes, and that's where people say, all right, I know with a level of certainty that these guys are not going to come and be yanking my chain anymore.
Okay, I've heard your speaker, Speaker of the House, Ryan, say several occasions that, listen, we can't have this log jam of legislation. We're going to have to deal with one thing at a time. I know in my circles there's some debate on that. Do you have any thoughts about that statement and how deep it is?
Well, you can only vote on one thing at a time physically, but I think what is actually happening is the amount of work that's going on in tax reform right now is very exciting. Chairman Brady of the Ways and Means Committee is driving a process and moving to create a tax code that's competitive and growth-oriented and simpler, and that's happening. At the same time, you've got House committees that are dealing with repealing Obamacare, coming up with a better alternative. You've got House committees that are moving through and dealing with regulatory reform. You've got House committees that are dealing with infrastructure. So what we want to make sure we avoid the lesson of the ACA, which was what? It gets written in the Speaker's office.
Yeah, but it's so much easier to pass it, let everybody else write it, and then send the Speaker of the House, who is Pelosi, say, if you want to know what's in it, you have to pass it.
And it's a disaster.
Well,
and so
I can't
what we're
believe what being dubbed the new party of no, how can they expect that you're going to have all this legislation and it's not going to take some time to do? I'm sure everybody asks the same question.
Well, and look,
when is it going to happen? Is it done yet?
Right, and here's the point. With some of these people, it doesn't matter what you would propose, it's not good enough. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too fast, it's too slow, it's too heavy, it's too light. So whatever. Here's what we got to do. We need to work steadily, clearly, build consensus, put together a good agenda that makes sense. That takes time, but it doesn't give an excuse for dawdling, and so there's an urgency here. And the urgency in the House of Representatives is to move these pieces of legislation with dispatch. There's one thing that liberals do that we need to learn from. They use power when they get it. And for us to dither and over-contemplate is a fool's errand, but for us to jam the process is a fool's errand as well. We need to
it's
move
like
clearly.
discovery in court, right? If you get pressed on a date or a timetable and you give it, boy, you're going to be held to it. My final question, 9th District, of course, their ruling was out yesterday. Any thoughts?
Well, that's a district that just doesn't disappoint, right? I mean, it's very predictable, and of course that's the district out of which you're going to find the harshest criticism. That said, I think the Trump administration could have been more nimble in their drafting and so forth and laying out the refugee program. But when it all comes down to it, I think there's an urgency here that needs to be dealt with. And look, the country elected Donald Trump to flip the game board, and he's flipping the game board.
You know what? I think you're wrong on that. If this was like football, we have a team that's running away with the ball, in my opinion. Congressman, absolute pleasure. Thanks for taking the time. David, back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Santelli. Now let's send it over to John Ford.